Hello Topaz Studio users, this is Joe Jasper again with yet another segment on masking. And this is a little bit of trickery to deal with some difficult areas like uh, this Arctic fox, which was shot against a fairly dark background. And then I added a new texture that I created from a couple of other Topaz textures. And I created a mask of my Arctic fox, put him on there, and from a zoomed out position it looks pretty good, but if we zoom in you can see as we get closer and closer that gee, the blueness in between the hairs here still reflects some of that darker background and didn't blend quite as well. So of course one of the things one usually does to try to optimize that with a mask is to get a black brush, let's make it a little smaller, and have the transition zone of the red outside the hair and the um, green circle going just inside the solid part, if possible, of the white that we want to keep, and clicking, and you can see in these areas it's helping, but it may at times start to get rid of some of the hairs you want to keep. So this technique works pretty well. I can't remember who it was, Hazel Meredith or somebody said just clicking rather than uh, swooping, may work really well. And what the program is doing is inside the red circle, it's learning what you want to keep. And outside the green circle, it's, excuse me, I'm going to get that back the other way. Inside the red circle is what we're trying to get rid of with a black brush. And outside the green circle is what we want to keep in the overlapping area here. And so the program's trying to learn what you want to keep, but you can see that it's erasing some of the hair. If we switch back to the white brush and come back, we get the hair back, but we're still getting some of the bleed through. Not too bad. We could probably keep on with this and do pretty well. But some of these hairs were taller, and as I tried to bring some of them back, it was just kind of failing. So I had to come up with another solution. One of the reasons that this bleed through of the dark background, original background, is that the original background was indeed dark, as you can see down here, and the new background is lighter. And so trying to solve all the problem in this zone was a challenge. And the thing I thought of was, well, why don't we look at blend modes to try to figure this out? So let me reset this. This is where I ended up with my first try at it. So I'm going to concentrate just on one small part of this problem in this area because I think you can see it pretty well here, the darkness here versus the color it should be, and lightness that it should be right up here, and the loss of some of the hair that should be sticking up on this guy's back, as was present in the original photograph. Here, you can see how tall those hairs are compared to these. So I decided that we could make use of blend modes in a layer. So what I did was I first created a new mask, although I could have used one that I already used. But let's show you how I create the mask for this guy. I went to basic adjustments first, and this is a good trick for any of your images if you can exaggerate the difference between the subject and the background, especially on the periphery of difficult areas like this. I brought up the highlights, I brought down some of the shadows, and maybe not. change black level perhaps a little bit, change white level. You can do that and try to exaggerate some of those differences, but we can do that also in a different way. I'm going to show you. I'm going to change this to black and white and exaggerate the oranges and yellows that were present in the coat of the animal, bringing more of the animal white. Like so. And we can see if changing these others, bringing down the green, darken the background a little. This one's doing nothing. This one's going the wrong way, so let's bring it to the right. Purple's not making much difference. Magenta, maybe a little bit. And we can change the gray, but it's going to change it in both the fox and the background. So let's be careful with that one. And then add an adjustment layer of tone curves. And by bringing the whites to the left, so there's these points at the bottom of the tone curve. If you bring the whites to the left, it'll start blowing the whites, but in a way that we really want. It's exaggerating the periphery here. So I'm going to bring the blacks to the right. And I'm watching to make sure I'm not making the hair disappear, right? We want that periphery of hair to stay. I'm keeping a close eye on it. Looks good. Still looks good. Maybe getting a little too close for comfort. Bring the other side over. And what's this going to do? It almost looks like a mask already, right? And if I do too much, it starts blowing the transition in the hair here. So I got to be careful. So it almost looks like a mask. Obviously, we're going to have to make sure that what we want to be white in the mask is truly white. Eyes, fur, perhaps we want the log. And what we truly want to be black in the mask, we're going to have to tweak a little bit. By doing this, I can now create a mask from this. So because I've used 3 different adjustments, what I want to do is use an effect mask rather than just one of these masks. And besides, it'll be nicely applicable to images. So we go over to the effect mask, and I'm going to choose Luma, go to a dark area, maybe this darkness, and see how we do. So if I chose the darkest area, then we'd have less contrast between the subject and that. There, I can bring down the range a bit, play with which level we want to use of luminosity to get the best overall masking sort of effect, and play with the range a little bit. Go to the adjustment, play with the contrast and the density, and see if we can optimize this mask so that we have a lot less work to do. Then pick up a brush, a white brush, and I'm going to start out like so. Going over the eyes and the nose. I might make this a less soft brush and just avoiding the transitional zone. I'm going to fill in as much of the solid fur. And don't forget, we want to probably keep that log. So right now I'm being careful to stay just inside of the transitional zone all around. Then we can get a finer brush that's softer. And then we can tweak this mask again when we get to the real thing. And really we don't need all this because we're just going to be concentrating on this area, so I can calm down a little bit here. So we've got a pretty sharp black to white mask here. I can go into adjustment again. I'm really just concerned about this area, and I'll show you why in just a little bit. So let's zoom in on that as much as possible. See how we're doing in preserving these hairs. So I'm just going to save this mask, copy the mask, and then I can go on to what I want to do next. So here's what we had before. And what I'm going to do is click and drag my texture back on. And I'm going to remember, where did I have my best fur? Was on the original animal. So I'm going to click the original photo. And then I'm going to click the mask and see if it'll apply. If it doesn't, we can use the effect mask, but let's try. Yep, worked pretty well. Now you can see we got a very dark transition here, right? But watch what happens when I just change the blend mode to lighter color. That goes away. But we only want to see it here where our trouble spot was. So I'm going to take that mask that we so carefully created, perhaps to an extent far greater than we needed. And I'm going to mask away the rest of the fox that we don't need to adjust with a black brush. Bring the hardness up, stay inside. Oh, I might have gone a little too far. We'll check. So I'm just going to go around the periphery here. And obviously the more carefully you do this, the better off you will be. I'm looking down at the mask here to see, okay, where did I not fill that in? And of course we could come down to the stump, all this area. Where we don't really need the adjustment because they weren't the trouble spot. Zoom out perhaps. Get rid of all this. Looks pretty bizarre right now, huh? The magic's gonna happen. Trust Joe. I'm gonna get a wee bit smaller here. All right, I'm going to copy this mask and I'm going to use it as a mask on the texture. And I'm going to paste that mask and see how we're doing. And now I can see little traces of what I don't want. Get my black brush again. It's smaller, less soft, and just kind of carefully go around these edges, smaller if necessary. So I don't want to spend too much time, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to do. Just tweak the mask where it needs tweaking. Get rid of little artifacts. So now if I zoom in here and I turn on and off the effect, you can see this is what we had before. Darken between the hairs of the fur that were being erased by the mask, and now I have it back. It's a little too bold now, so all we have to do is come to the effect opacity and decrease it to where it's pleasing and natural, and boom. Now we have a much better effect in those areas that were problematic before. See, the halo here is gone by using a lighter blending mode. It looks like we have a little bit of problem here. Okay, so that's how I solved my problem. Complex, but the tools are there in Topaz Studio masking. You just have to think of how to solve the problem, and it comes back. You can do very complex, intricate masking of fur and veils and stuff like that by repeating your masking and making use of things like lighter or darker color and more masking, and achieve a very natural looking result. Instead of having a crew cut, he's back to having his hair sticking up like he just stuck his paw in an electric socket, just like he did in the original. So, boom, boom. Thanks for joining me. Hope this helps.